All right, welcome to our podcast. I'm Adam Ray, ElProfeGringo, here with Matt the lawyer, live from Colombia. How are things in Colombia, my friend?
Colombia is great. Very hot day today.
Nice. What part of Colombia are you in?
Up in the northeast by the Venezuelan border. Nice small city here. Beautiful place.
Well, here I'm live in Tampa, Florida, and we've had some cold weather come in, so that's good.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Anyway, the reason we're on here, we'll get right to the point, is both Matt and I are big sports fans. We spend a lot of time talking about sports. We thought, why not go ahead and put it out there for the world, see what other people think, and also it's a way to kind of, for me, desquitar is the word in Spanish. I got to get some of these frustrations out, these things that happen in the world. I find a lot of injustice in the sports world. Isn't that right, Matt? A lot of things frustrate me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So real quick, what are the sports that you're into, just so the people know us a little bit? You know, not everybody's into all sports. Yeah. We Americans it's a very sports pro culture, though. We get into it a lot. So what are the sports that you like?
I like NBA basketball. NFL football is trailing a little bit behind them. I watch it sporadically. Baseball, I watch it during the season. If the Dodgers or Orioles are playing, I'll put them on. I watch a lot of soccer, European football. What am I missing? Baseball, football. Yeah, those are pretty much it.
Okay. And for me, I'm also big into European soccer, but that's really a very new thing for me. If you go back just a few years, I was not into it, didn't really understand the sport. Most Americans don't grow up playing it. We don't grow up watching it. We don't understand the game. And then the soccer that we do get here in the States and like the MLS is a very inferior product.
And there's not a big NCAA soccer thing. There's not like college soccer is not a big thing. So
a lot of high schools don't even have a soccer team, or if they do, it's certainly not the big draw like American football is, or even basketball.
See, I went to a very small high school, a central school in New York State, where we didn't have football. We only had soccer. Our girls team was excellent. They would always be at states. We were division class D, I think it was labeled. It's a small school. The boys team were good, not as good as the girls teams, but that was the number one. There's no lacrosse. There was skiing, track, and baseball, soccer. That was about no hockey, no football. So soccer was big there growing up. So it kind of grew up a little bit like that.
I grew up in Western Michigan, and I think my high school did have a soccer team, but I don't remember them, being a thing that was talked about. You need a lot fewer players to play soccer. Obviously, a football team, you're going to want to have 30, 40 guys minimum on a high school football team. Soccer, you don't need that many. Right. So it's easier to field a team, perhaps. But anyway, what brings us here today is my favorite sport. You just listed yours. I also am big into NBA basketball. European soccer I like a lot. The NFL I don't watch anymore, haven't for years. But my favorite sport has been and continues to be college football. And that's part of that's growing up in Michigan. I'm a huge Michigan fan. And one of our inspirations for being here today is what is for me the absolute criminal travesty that just happened to Florida State University. I don't know what you think about that, Matt. Maybe you walk us through what happened to Florida State and what do you think about these events?
And for me, my background in college football is much different. Didn't have a local team. Syracuse was the closest, and they were pretty good when I was a kid. But, for me, it was watching the New York Giants on Sunday. In college, I just found somewhat entertaining when I was very young, just because of the different uniforms and mascots. But I never really had a team, except I'd root against Notre Dame. Because that was like the big team for a lot of kids at school. And I was thinking about, when we were talking a little bit off camera, the first, I think, one I ever watched was Alabama, Miami, which I believe was 92. Gene Stallings, Jay Barker, most of the Alabama defensive side went on to be first round draft picks. George Teague,
right?
But that was one of those weird years where Miami was wire to wire, the AP.
Had Gino Torretta on that team, or was he gone?
Gino Torretta, Heisman, yeah.
Right.
And I believe, and they had all the AP votes except for one voter, I think in Arizona. I don't know if I remember that. And then they had the first year of the SEC championship, which I think Georgia beat Florida. And I think there might have been underdogs because they had a very very vanilla offense, but a great defense. And then they beat Miami in a huge upset. They're like, 2 or 3 touchdown underdog, I think. Anyway, but that was one of those years where it was easy. You had 2 undefeated teams, Alabama, Miami.
Right. Playing in the Orange Bowl, I assume, or the Sugar Bowl.
Sugar, I want to say, but I might be.
Sugar or Orange, one of those two.
Yeah, one of those two.
Right.
And then in subsequent years, you have sort of a bunch of one-loss teams fighting it out. Say, was one undefeated, and who's the best one-loss team?
Right.
Like Florida had a year like that. I think '96 was the Florida Steve Spurrier championship.
Danny Werfel, yeah.
Yeah. I know USC got screwed a couple years when they put LSU against Oklahoma when USC was clear. I think Oklahoma had lost to Kansas State.
That was a 2-loss LSU team. Is that right? If I remember
right. I believe that was that one. And USC was clearly the best team in the country, split title.
Right.
So anyway, this Florida State thing is we have Michigan and Washington undefeated.
Right.
They win earlier in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Georgia's undefeated playing Alabama. And Texas has 1 loss to Oklahoma, but they've beaten Alabama. Texas wins pretty handily.
Over Alabama. They won by 10 points, and that game was not that close. Right.
Not close.
And
Alabama.
Alabama had just needed a miracle to beat a mediocre Auburn team on a Hail Mary. And they don't make that, then they lose that game.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And Georgia hadn't played anyone. Georgia had one of the worst non-conference schedules.
And I don't know why their strength of schedule is so high anyway. I mean, they beat Georgia Tech, who has good teams sometimes. I don't even know what their other non-conference games were. Did they play?
It was UAB and Ball State, and I want to say like Georgia Southern, some school like that.
All right, so 3 gimme games, 3 pancakes.
3 gimme games.
Yeah, and then they play in the SEC East, which was down this year. Florida's down.
Right, Florida's down. Mississippi's good. Missouri's good, but not that level good.
Oh, they did play Mississippi. That's right. Yeah.
Mississippi, Missouri. They played Missouri, and Missouri was like ranked 10 when they played them. So. Okay. But Missouri's not like some world. If Missouri played Alabama, I think Alabama would be favored by 2 touchdowns, right?
Right.
So anyway, Florida State, tragically, their quarterback has this injury in one of their gimme games.
Right.
And then they barely get by. Well, I guess they dominate the next guy defensively. Florida
was a tighter game than a lot of people want.
Tighter game, yeah. And then in the title game, Louisville, again, the defense dominates.
You win by 10 points. You win by 10 points against a team in the top 20 in a title game. They act like that's a bad win.
Neutral field.
Yeah, you have to win by 50. Any win less than 50 is not a legitimate win.
Right. And like the quarterback, he only threw for 55 yards. He had never. I don't think he had more than a half a dozen passes in his career. He's a third string guy. 2 straight injuries. So. Now so Florida State gets passed over by a combination of Texas and Alabama. One of those 2 teams.
They put Texas in because they had to. See, here's what I think. And again, I think Florida State got historically robbed. And one way that they can get away with it is this 14 playoff is now ending. So, next year we'll go to 12. And of course, as you and I have said many times, the 12-team playoff won't last very long. It'll soon expand to 16 or 24 because whichever team is right on the outside will have a legitimate argument for why they got left out, right? If I'm in position 13, you could easily say, well, I should have been in instead of team 12. I saw a mock today of what the 12-team playoff would have looked like if it had existed this year, and it included like Liberty would have made it.
Oh, okay, wow.
And I think Oklahoma would have gotten left out. So you're seeing a 10-2 Oklahoma team, which beat Texas. Right. They get left out, but Liberty gets to make the tournament.
Nobody.
This is not right. Please. So Liberty, good for them, is not Oklahoma. Oklahoma would massacre them every day of the week. And Oklahoma then at position 13 or the first team left out would have a major complaint. But look at Florida State. Florida State, for those who don't follow college football, is a major power. If you watch Colombian soccer, we're talking about Atlético Nacional. If you watch European soccer, this is Barcelona, multiple national championships. Now they've had some up and down years, but they are, if you talk about the 10 or 15 top franchises, colleges in college football, Florida State's right there. They're right there. So you're not leaving out like UConn, who happened to go undefeated in a lucky thing. You're leaving
Boston
out Florida
College.
State. They have a massive fan base, huge money. They just paid Jimbo Fisher like $50 million to go away, like what, 3-4 years ago, whatever it was, before he went to Texas A&M. So they get left out for a one-loss Alabama team. I think it is pure behind-the-scenes fraud. I wouldn't be surprised if these committee members are being bribed directly under the table in the same way that these like the FIFA guys bribe get bribes from the city.
Yeah, the Qatari thing,
or the Olympics are full of corruption. It has to. There has to be some major
any bidding. When someone wants to fix a highway in Maryland, there's bribery in the bids.
Exactly. So to me, it has to be bribery. They couldn't leave Michigan out and Washington because they're both undefeated and have played well basically all year. But I don't know how you can, does Washington play in a better conference than Florida State? Is the Pac-12 that good? Who's good in the Pac-12?
ACC was better against the SEC. Head to head, the ACC was like 3-2 against SEC or something.
I think they were 6-4 actually.
6-4, okay, I know they had a winning record.
Yeah, winning record.
Well, here's a scenario for you. Let's say if Georgia wins, then Texas goes over Florida State. You assume?
Well, if they maintain their logic, the sense.
See, I don't know that because then Alabama's a 2-loss team,
right? And so I think they only put. Yeah. Exactly. They put Texas in because they couldn't put Alabama in without putting Texas in.
Right. I think if Georgia wins, you could put Florida State
as a 4.
As the 4. And if Oregon wins, you could probably leave out Oregon. Right?
Yeah, I don't know what would happen. I don't think that when you have an undefeated Power 5 team, they can be left out for a one-loss team from another conference. I don't see that.
Right. Here there's 2 one-loss teams.
Right. There's 5 major conferences and only 4 spots. And again, next year that all goes away. So they can kind of look past this nonsense. Anyway, this goes back to bigger stuff too. I'm 40 years old. I'm a college football fan since I was a little kid, screaming that the Michigan State defensive back grabbed Desmond Howard in the end zone in 1993 and he dropped the pass and they lost the game. So we're talking 30 years ago. I remember that. College football has been completely ruined, in my opinion. Completely ruined. The bowls, the traditions. You got West Virginia, and we're going to look at a map here in a minute, which explains kind of what we've been working on. West Virginia plays in the Big 12 with a bunch of teams from Texas. It's utter nonsense. And that's been going on for years. Now the Pac-12 is dissolving. It's teams from the West. All the West Coast teams are going to switch and move around. I don't even know anymore who's going to play in what conference.
Yeah, the Los Angeles teams in the Big Ten with Rutgers. That doesn't make sense.
That's from the New York metropolitan area and Maryland, which is in the D.C. metropolitan area.
Right. That's another weird one, Maryland.
Utter nonsense what they've done. The conferences don't mean anything. All the
tradition and the ACC.
Well, what is the ACC anymore now? Who's in the ACC?
It's not Atlantic. It's not It's they're adding Berkeley, they're adding Stanford, and they're adding SMU, which is a strange one.
They play in the Houston area, right?
It's a Houston Metro team, and I guess there's some history there as far as being a decent football program, but they
have no connection to the ACC.
No, right? There's no, and they're not a basketball program either, which
and that's another thing too. And let's talk about that. Football is one thing. They play 12 games a year, 13 until they expand it. Yeah. You only play 6 games on the road. So if you got to pack up the football team, there's huge money. You put these kids now on private jets and you fly them to the game. Fine. What about the golf team? What about the women's volleyball team?
Tennis
team. The tennis team from
gymnastics
Stanford has to fly to Rutgers to have a match?
Yeah, well, Stanford would go to Clemson and go to Miami and go to what's another ACC team that doesn't
Boston College, right?
Charlottesville, Virginia.
Yeah.
And a lot of these college towns aren't even in the city. Like, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, okay, it's an hour from Raleigh or whatever. But you're going from Stanford to Chapel Hill to play in front of 50 fans. And your parents and family who want to watch, they're like, well, I can't fly to North
Carolina. They're not watching. No way.
For this game. I'm working.
Boost your money for that, right?
Yeah. Fly to Boston from Berkeley. It's ludicrous. And let's say you're Boston College. You used to be in the Big East, where you were with the New York City schools, Providence, Georgetown, Philadelphia, Villanova and Philadelphia, Georgetown, Washington, D.C. Train rides up and down. If you're the tennis team, very easy. Your furthest trip is like DePaul when you play Chicago. And then that DePaul is sort of a later add to that conference.
Right, exactly.
Storrs, Connecticut, UConn. But now these conferences, the SEC is no longer Southeast, right? They've added
it's all over
Missouri,
the place. Texas,
Texas, Oklahoma. Yeah, definitely not Southeast.
Definitely not.
The Big Ten is not a Midwestern conference. It has West Coast, has East Coast.
It's basically the whole country except the Southeast.
Country. Yeah, except for the Southeast.
And they have no reason. It's another thing. These conferences exist for historical, competitive, geographic reasons. And there was once an academic component. The schools in the ACC, except for, I don't know. I mean, they're all pretty good academically, really. Yeah. And the SEC wasn't, and the Big Ten was, and the Pac-12 mostly was, minus maybe Arizona, et cetera. But you had some of the best schools in the country academically and geographically connected, playing for those reasons. We have something in common. Well, now what does Oregon have in common with Maryland, other than they're both universities in the United States?
Right. Nothing. Arizona State with Northwestern. What's the connection?
Nothing. Now I think Arizona State is going to the Big 12, but again, those conferences too, we're really getting to a point where there's only going to be two anyway, I think. Some northern one and some southeastern one.
Yeah.
And they'll have to figure it out.
Yeah, some Rust Belt sort of thing, and then some Bible
like Florida up to Kentucky and west of Texas, and that's it. And then the rest of the country, it's like the Civil
Kentucky
War.
should join the ACC. Kentucky's more of an ACC kind of team.
They are, and same with Cincinnati, Louisville. I mean, those are all kind of
right. Because if Kentucky can play Louisville, play the Carolina schools, that makes sense.
Right. So in that spirit, I don't like to just complain just to complain. So I want to share something with our audience here. And this is something that I've worked on. I once years ago designed a conference system. There were 9 conferences. There was a tournaments and all this stuff. But that was years ago, before all this nonsense that we have now in college football. It really began way back in 1997 when both Michigan and Nebraska finished undefeated and both won their bowl games. And there was a split national title. Then they came up with this BCS stuff, which you can look up. That lasted a little while before they went to the tournament. So here's my solution. I want to give it to you, Matthew, and you tell me what you think. As someone who became a fan of European soccer in the last few years, I remember learning about relegation. Relegation is something that happens in European soccer, all over the world of football, association football, but it's not common in any American sports in at all. No. And I think there's some lessons there. So here's what I propose. You can see here on this map, I've divided the country into 4 zones. And these zones are specifically designed to maintain tradition, to be geographically feasible, and to make sure that old rivalries are able to be played. The number you see on each state, for example, in the state of California, you see here is the number 90. That's the number of universities that have a college football team. Now, these numbers haven't been updated because I designed this about a year ago. So sometimes colleges close, they shut down their football program. Sometimes the colleges will start one up. But generally, you can see here, the state of Texas has 46, Florida 18, etc. You'd be surprised. State of Minnesota, relatively small population, 35 programs. And this goes all the way down to like the very, very tiny schools, Division III,
NAIA teams. Yeah,
exactly. Look at how many are in Pennsylvania, 54 programs.
Right. Villanova has a program. It's just not Division I or II. It's like
exactly. Hillsdale College in Michigan. They play, I don't know, Division III or something like that, very small, but they have a football.
Duquesne plays. Yeah,
exactly. So here's how this will work. You have 4 divisions. The West Coast, let's call it the North or the Upper Midwest plus the East, the Texas-based division, and then a Southeastern Conference.
Okay.
Here's how it would work. In each zone, you would have a division, or you could call it a conference, whatever you will, similar to European soccer. In the top flight would be 15 teams. Originally, I thought 13, but I think 15 is a better number.
Okay. 60
so In those, no, the 15 total teams. So in those 15
60
teams,
across the map.
right, it would be the top 60. Exactly. That's Division 1. Then the next 60 would be in Division 2 and Division 3 and so on. And obviously, the Midwestern division has more total football schools. So at some point, you'd get to a level where it's only them in Division 10.
Yeah.
Well, but
like in England, how there's more divisions in England than there are in France.
Exactly right.
There's
so
more
in
tiers.
theory, it would work very simply. You would play in your division and your division only. So if you're, let's say, Michigan in the top, then you would play 14 games, 7 home, 7 on the road against the other teams in the top division. It'd be Ohio State. It'd be Notre Dame, see, part of the state of Indiana. Yeah, everything must be done within state lines, okay? Then at the end of the year, the team with either the most points, if you want to do a point system like European soccer, or the best record, however you want to do it, would play in a bowl game. Very simply, the team from the Midwest in brown would play the champion of the green, USC, Washington, Oregon, whoever it is, in the Rose Bowl. In the Rose Bowl. And you'd have the tradition, the date, all of the stuff maintained, because traditions like this matter. And the fact that they're being ruined, who's playing in the Rose Bowl this year? Washington and Texas?
No.
Is that right? Who is it? Michigan and Alabama? Whatever it is, it's not the matchup it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a Midwestern team from the Big Ten playing a Pacific Coast team.
Michigan USC was the classic rivalry.
Exactly. Michigan USC, Ohio State Washington. That's what it should be. And in the South, the Texas area champion, which could include Oklahoma, Nebraska, Arkansas, LSU, would play the winner from the Southeast in the Sugar Bowl. In the Sugar Bowl, it could be Florida, could be Georgia, Tennessee, whomever, right? Now, here's important. The bottom teams, let's say the bottom 3, the teams with the 3 fewest points or the 3 worst records, would be relegated to Division 2. Sure. That way, let's say you're a team like Cincinnati, Louisville, whatever it is, you could win your division, Division 2, Division 3, and if you're in the top 3, you advance. And quite simply, the winner of the Sugar Bowl and the winner of the Rose Bowl play one more game for the national title. That's it. Right. And that way, every year, none of this drama, none of this ridiculousness, no human beings making I got money in my pocket, so I'm going to pick Alabama over Florida State decisions. Right. You can continue to have the bowl games, right? The team that finishes second in the West could play the team that finishes second in the Southeast. Traditional matchups, Peach Bowl, Gator Bowl, all those things could still exist. But this is something important, and Jim Harbaugh talked about this recently. The players need to be paid. If you are like, look at Ohio State's quarterback. What you saw what just happened with Ohio State's quarterback, man?
Yeah, transfer portal.
He's leaving the program.
Yeah, tons of hate mail and nonsense from those fans.
He's getting run out of town, but he realizes, look, I'm not really well liked here anyway. I can go risk my neck, risk injury to go play in some bowl game that's meaningless. Completely ruined by this system. Or I can get out of here. I can go somewhere else, be a starter somewhere else, have a fresh start, maybe make something of myself wherever he wants to go. Sure. What do I need to be here and risk my health for a bowl game that's irrelevant?
Yeah, the USC quarterback opted out of the Holiday Bowl, and but people are attacking him for that. Like, why would you, like, who cares? It's a 7-5 team that went nowhere, obviously is going nowhere. And why would you risk anything playing against, I don't know who plays in the Holiday Bowl, whatever.
It's a Christmas Day bowl game. It was when I was a kid, and it's usually a Pac-12 team against somebody else. But
and it's usually a high-scoring game. I remember that. I remember from gambling, it was like always a high over/under.
Right. So again, a pointless game. This guy's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. Sure. And he says, why do I want to hurt myself? So in my system, I would make it mandatory that the revenue generated from the bowl games be shared directly with the players. It could be you take half of the money and say, I don't know how you could do it, but half of the earnings, let's say, goes directly to all the players who play in the game or something along those lines. You have to be an active member of the roster to receive the check. And again, if you're someone like Caleb Williams, that check is probably not worth it anyway. You're still going to quit, but at least you wouldn't have all this transferring and moving, right? Because think about Ohio State quarterback. That guy's probably never going to play in the NFL. So if he says, look, if I play in this bowl game, I'm going to get X amount of check, and that's completely fair because these bowl games are generating massive revenue.
Oh yeah.
I saw that Senator Rick Scott, one of the senators from the state of Florida, sent a letter to all the members of the committee because he's just pissed that Florida State didn't get selected. And he said that Florida State might miss out on at least $2 million by this decision. Minimum of $2 million. That's
and they're still playing in a big bowl, so they're losing money. They're making money, but that's
$2 million are going to be out because of this decision. So some of that money needs to be shared with the players. These are
absolutely
not unlike if you and I, as let's say a PhD student in the sciences, can work on some government project and help the university make money. These guys are generating money for the university.
Hand over foot.
Yeah. So anyway, you can see here on this map. What do you think, Matthew? Go ahead. Yeah.
Why is Louisiana and Mississippi with Texas and not with Georgia and Alabama? Isn't that a big rivalry that's going to be split?
There's a great question there, and there's another issue up here above, which I'll talk about. So I made the decision for balance, but also to maintain rivalries. I did some research into LSU. LSU is a major power, and their traditional rivals are Mississippi, Mississippi State, a little bit with Alabama and Auburn, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. So if you see here, the only ones they really miss out on are Alabama and Auburn. They don't have a major history with Tennessee. There is something with them being a cross rival with Florida now that would go away in this system. But if you look, who has LSU played the most games against? It's Mississippi State and Mississippi, and that maintains in this rivalry. I had to make some decisions for balance because I didn't want all of the historical powers or most of the historical powers to be clumped together. So
because if you honor all of those, then all of a sudden it's
you'd have one conference that would have like all the dominant franchises or a huge number of them, and it wouldn't be fair. Up above two. Oh, go ahead, Matthew. Go ahead.
I'm glad to see Missouri and Nebraska back together. The border war, the oldest rivalry in college football, was destroyed by this scheduling nonsense because they were both, I think, the Big Eight.
They were both in the Big Eight and then later the Big 12.
Big 12, and then one went one way, one went the other way. And
we've also restored Nebraska, Colorado, which is a huge thing, which should be played every year, in my opinion.
That's yep. So the border war was ended because of stupid realignment. So it's nice to see that back together.
Right. And you can see here, one of the other things, too, is West Virginia. So here I've set West Virginia's biggest rival really is Pitt. But
backyard brawl.
Right. But they're separated here. Again, this is a theory. I guess you could put West Virginia up with the Ohio, Pennsylvania schools. But to me, I think West Virginia has natural rivalries with Virginia Tech, with Virginia, with Louisville and the Kentucky schools.
Where's Marshall? Marshall's part of that too, right?
Marshall is in West Virginia.
Oh, okay. So Marshall, West Virginia is preserved.
Right. So again, you could move West Virginia up one, that'd be fine. But you see the spirit of what we've done here is we have maintained geographic reality. There's balance. The Western Division, the one that's in green, really has four traditional powers: USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. But other good teams too. They have Utah, BYU, Arizona, and Arizona State sometimes.
Colorado.
Right? Exactly. It's the smallest one. In the middle, we have Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska. We have Arkansas, LSU. Southeast, you have the three Florida schools: Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson. Right, all quite good. In the north, Notre Dame, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, etc. So the idea is you have balance, you maintain tradition, you can still have your bowls, you can still have your national champion, you can get rid of all this human nonsense, right? It's the winner versus the winner, and then one final national title game.
Yeah, and I misspoke. Colorado's in the blue. Colorado's not in the green.
Right, Colorado's blue. Again, that's a tough one because you could say Colorado has a natural thing with Wyoming or Utah, but their real rival's Nebraska, and that's who they ought to be playing.
The Wyoming's not a national sort of on the map, and with some Montana. So the West, you have the coastal teams plus Arizona and Utah. That's nice to have them together. Nevada has a program. They're just not very good.
UNLV.
New Mexico and New Mexico State, they're not even Pac-12. They're like they're like Mountain West or something. So
they're right. And to me, they belong with Texas. New Mexico has a natural rivalry with Texas El Paso.
I agree. Yeah, UTEP is in there. And then let's see, you have Iowa. Okay, so Iowa stays in the Big Ten. Well,
you have to move them, right? And again, they have a rivalry with Nebraska and Missouri too, but have to make some decisions. So.
Yeah, I think Iowa belongs more with Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois anyway. Right. I think to me that just seems more natural.
Exactly.
What's that state? Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky with the Carolinas and Tennessee. That's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, West Virginia is the one that kind of, like you said, can go either way. And I think Mississippi and Louisiana, you almost have to treat as one. So if you couldn't put Louisiana and not Mississippi.
And in the interest of balance, again, because LSU is a power historically, you're thinking to yourself, all right, this Southeastern Division would have Florida, Florida State, Miami, Alabama, Auburn, Georgia, Clemson, Tennessee. I mean, wow, this is a lot of big-time football. And in my system, you only got 15 teams in the top, 3 getting relegated. So,
that's a good point, too.
If you're a team like Tennessee, you say, Jesus, I got to play Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Georgia. Like, what a schedule. So I thought it
right.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you look at the green zone, if you picked 15, like once you get past the first 10, then the next 5 are like, ooh.
Yeah, the talent is probably the weakest out west.
Yeah.
But you have to make some concessions. So that's part of the reason why I thought LSU, Arkansas, and Mississippi belonged more with the Texas, Oklahoma.
Yeah, I agree. And and whatever. Maybe USC, UCLA never get relegated in the system, but maybe Florida does on a bad year and have to rebuild. It could happen.
Anyone could be relegated, and that's another thing that's interesting about this aspect is, you get into a thing when if you're only playing for the national title, now that you have 12 spots, maybe 20 teams will be playing meaningful games at the end of the year. But it used to be that beating your rival mattered. So even if you were Florida and you were having a rough year, you're like, well, but if we beat Florida State, then we'll feel good about our season. That's all gone now.
Right.
It's all gone. Especially if you look what happened to Florida State. They beat Miami. They beat Clemson. They beat Florida. They beat LSU. And nothing. They got sent to some game that they don't even want to play in.
Yeah, and I've done not a lot of research, but I remember just out of fun, I was like looking at the little trophy games, very popular in the Big Ten, Little Brown Jug, the Illabug,
Minnesota, right?
Yeah, and like all those fun little, if you're a Minnesota fan, the Little Brown Jug is your Super Bowl, right?
Absolutely. It means a whole lot. You want something like that because you can sort of rub it in Michigan's face that we beat you this year.
Right. I guess we lose Notre Dame and USC. That's somewhat of a
that is a rough
one. That one hurts a little.
Perhaps there could be some way to add in another game somehow, a preseason game, but you do have to make some concessions.
Kind of.
Notre Dame USC is one rivalry that again is across the country. It'd be hard to maintain in any kind of geographic system.
Yeah, you couldn't without screwing a lot of things up.
Anyway, this system I think is so perfect. It's as close to perfect as it's going to get. It means it has absolutely zero chance of ever being implemented, right? It's far too good a system.
It's going to be a 50-team tournament before we're 50.
I think, right, again, I'm 40 years old. I fear very much that they're going to go to like a 6-game regular season against nobody and then have a 64-team tournament.
Yeah, it's going to be like the stupid basketball
the entire winter.
They want to make everything March Madness. Baseball's March Madness now. Just expand. Hey, you won 81 games. Okay, fine. Join the playoff. Play the Dodgers in a 3-game series.
I don't know why they have the regular season. Just have the playoffs. Have like a best of 100 playoff or something.
They have the worst combination. 162 games is too long, and then the playoffs are too chaotic. They
don't value the regular season.
Yeah, they have
other podcasts. We're going to talk about that, other sports and other ways that we see things that can be fixed. We're solutions people, Matt the lawyer and ElProfeGringo, right? We don't just complain.
All right, man. Well, let's. I guess I got to run to this meeting.
We'll call it for now. But anyway, thanks for the time and enjoy what you do. All right.
See you next time coming through.